Hello dear friends, and my apologies for not making one of these videos in quite a long while now, almost a month or over a month even actually. I've been traveling in the summer and teaching quite actively, and it's been a wonderful summer, Northern Hemisphere summer, but very busy. But I hope to be able to provide more content more regularly in the near future. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that often comes up in discussions of emptiness. The Mahayana concept of emptiness, śūnyatā, that is of particular importance, a kind of a gross misunderstanding sometimes, and a very kind of unpleasant, unfortunate one. And this is conflating emptiness in the Buddhist philosophical sense with nihilism, or nihilism, however you pronounce it. I guess nihilism, coming from the Latin nihil, nothing, is perhaps more appropriate. Nihilism. Emptiness is not nihilism. And if we think about what is nihilism, we could say that there are several kinds. There's nihilism about objects, that there are no objects. Nihilism about values. There are no values, no good or bad, and so on. Nihilism about meaning, there is no meaning whatsoever. And so on. It's like a very kind of it's a very eliminative view on something. And perhaps the most painful one and the most common one, what we mean when we say nihilism, is perhaps nihilism about meaning, also about values, but those are also like a kind of like a subset in some sense of meaning. Nihilism about meaning, and as a set of that, nihilism about values. And nothing means anything. There's no purpose to anything. Everything is meaningless. Nothing has any value. Nothing is good. Nothing is beautiful. Nothing is anything. And in some sense, there is, it is akin to a kind of experience and a view that can arise from emptiness practice, for sure. But it is not emptiness. There are some very key things here that, distinguish it from emptiness. And the very bottom line, right from the get-go, the very bottom line is this. Nihilism is a view. Nihilism is a view. It's a particular attribution of meaning to reality, a particular configuration of meaning attribution on reality. So it's a view, and it's just as arbitrary as everything else, and that's the kind of where emptiness distinguishes itself from nihilism. Nihilism is just as arbitrary as anything else. Actual emptiness is not nihilism. It's not saying that nothing has meaning, nothing exists, etc. It's also not saying that anything exists or anything has objectively meaning. And that's also not emptiness. Rather, emptiness is the transcendence of this whole dichotomy. Neither existence nor non-existence. Neither meaningful or meaningless. It is arbitrary. It's flexible. And here we can see that, the core aspect, like how emptiness manifests itself and what we aim to kind of garner from emptiness insight is, of course, equanimity. Equanimity, being able to kind of not take things so seriously and kind of defabricating one's suffering and so on. But certainly also flexibility. Flexibility in view. So being able to kind of recognize that actually there is nothing knowable about this thing. We can't really know anything about reality, and that is also very kind of if one thinks about what points to emptiness, what kind of gives emptiness insight, what is the aspect of reality that leads to this kind of perception or realization or insight of emptiness. That can be put in one compound word, one two-part compound word: mind dependence. Whether like phenomena, everything we are in connection with, whether it is phenomena themselves, colors, shapes, sounds, etc., whether it's views, how we perceive things, what we see things as, the meanings we give to them, the names we give to them, etc., the functions and utility we see in them, and so on. Whatever you look at these phenomena themselves and the meanings we attach to them, both rupa, phenomena, the flow of form, rupa in classical Buddhist terminology, form, and nama, name, the attribution of meaning, of naming, of conceptualization, all its forms, both are equally fabricated. And what shows us this is that they're both mind-dependent. For example, like views are very flexible. We learn new things all the time, and everyone has some inkling of this insight. That views are very kind of arbitrary in some sense. Two people in the same room, let's say there are two people in the same ballroom. almost next to each other, or let's say they're sitting next to each other and they're watching a couple dancing in the ballroom, like a woman and a man dancing, and they seem to be having fun. And then one of these men sees them like, oh, there's a lovely couple dancing. They seem happy, like a happy couple dancing, happy, beautiful couple dancing. And the other man, sitting next to him, sees it as as terrible and asks themselves, what is that man doing with my wife, and so on. It's kind of it depends on what conditioning is there prior to it, what other conceptualizations are given to these aspects of reality. This is my wife. This is my wife. Her name, what she means to me, and so on, what commitment we have to each other, all of these views, conceptual structures. The view the man has on the situation is informed by his conceptual structures, much like the view of the other man. Neither one is in any sense more objective than the other. They're arbitrary, they're flexible. Views depend on just other views. Concepts depend on other concepts, views on other views. It's all just kind of like an overlay put on reality. So views are empty in this sense. They're mind dependent. It's about how we view things depends on how we view things. The ways we conceptualize depends on the ways we conceptualize. Really nothing more. Like of course we are inspired by our society in kind of which ways are found correct in our society to conceptualize certain things. For example, we would see like a table as a table, something to eat on, sitting next to the table, something to put plates on and so on, and not as a fruit picking stand, let's say, like a remote islander somewhere might, this looks like it's a fruit picking stand, and then they give them a name appropriate in their language and so on, and then they conceptualize it very differently than us, its function or its origin also, maybe it came from the heavens for them or something. For us it was made by a carpenter, or maybe like in a factory somewhere. In any case, these are arbitrary. But the same goes for phenomena themselves. Consider this, for example. Every night when we go to sleep, when we start falling into sleep, the external senses are turned off. The mind turns them off. It's not forced to turn them off. The mind-body system, the mind stream, the organism, it's not forced to turn them off. It's not like an external thing that senses somehow like that the objects disappear. Of course, the phenomena disappear, but anything beyond them, it's not like that. The mind turns it off. And what else does this say to us than that it's mind dependent? If the mind can decide in this sense, in this general sense, can decide whether things are there or not, whether the senses are active, whether phenomena appear or not, they are obviously mind dependent. They are subjectively existing, not objectively so. They're not really there, because they're there only if the mind wants them to them in a general sense to be there, and only if the mind believes them to be there. Similarly, meditative practice, as with other mind-altering things, like psychedelics and so on, affect phenomena tremendously. And just our view affects phenomena tremendously. For example, like promoting a sense of equanimity and concentration, for example, can cause the body sensations to start kind of fading away, or sounds to fade away, senses can fade away. They can also change, the movements of our attention change phenomena very much, whatever we have our attention on, the mind can attend to, grows in intensity, generally speaking, grows in importance, in salience. It changes. So like all of these, again, it's very malleable, it's mind dependent. What else is that, other than that they are in some sense not really there? They're empty. They have no intrinsic, inherent existence in themselves. They are dependent on the mind. Views and phenomena, nama and rupa, both dependent on the mind, both empty. But this, again, coming back to the nihilism versus emptiness thing, does not mean, mind dependence does not mean that they are meaningless, or that they don't exist, and so on. It's rather that their existence is flexible, and the meaning given to them is flexible. They're objectively neither meaningless nor meaningful. It's much more flexible. The flexibility goes much more deeper than that. There is no truth about the matter. And in this sense, if someone advocates or cultivates a nihilist view and is stuck in nihilism, which is, it's not just about its arbitrariness, because it is arbitrary. It's a particular nama, a particular way of naming, a particular way of attributing meaning, a particular view. If one is stuck with it, and in that sense, does not understand emptiness properly, and stuck with that, thinks this is true, which is something that emptiness really it's if there's something that emptiness would say about the truth or untruth about things, is that nothing is true or untrue, it just doesn't apply. So like also nihilism and so on is not true, it's neither untrue, it's not untrue either, and neither is meaningfulness. It's not true or untrue. It's beyond these things, and true and untrue don't apply, because it's again so very deeply flexible. It is, it's there if it's seen there. It's not there if it's not seen there. And there's nothing objective to either side. But if one is stuck with the nihilism, it sucks. It's a terrible view to uphold, and this is why it is important to advocate. Like, why this topic is so important is because so many people, when they start hearing about emptiness and they start practicing emptiness, they can become quite afraid that, like, am I going to lose my sense of meaning, and like, am I going to lose my sense of appreciation for the world, for my loved ones, for my job, for my hobbies, anything, like everything. Am I going to slide into nihilist meaninglessness? And that, if one misunderstands emptiness very much, one doesn't really maybe slide there, like to nihilism unless one wants to. But one can kind of be very afraid of it, and in that sense one can get quite a heavy taste of it, and it sucks. Basically it's always, or basically like very temporary dips in it can be insightful in some sense. But as a view to be maintained and upheld, it's very unskillful. It does not promote compassion. It does not promote, giving meaning to the helping of others, to love and so on, to beauty. It does not feel good in oneself. So it is, in that sense, it's unskillful. It's neither true, nor is it useful. And this is why it's very important to realize that it's not necessary. It's a misunderstanding. There's nothing in emptiness that points to nihilism. If you really understand it, I guarantee there's nothing in emptiness that points to nihilism. Rather, like the extent to which anything can exist becomes subjective. And then, like, because the things we project onto the world, the ideas we project onto the world, like beauty and love and so on, those ideas, like, it's also, emptiness is not saying that they don't exist. It's not saying that beauty does not exist. It's just, it's more like saying that there is no truth of the matter whether the tree over yonder is beautiful or not. There's no truth about the matter. That's what emptiness says. It's beyond truth and untruth. It's beyond beautiful and non-beautiful. It's beyond these dichotomies of true or untrue, real or not real, and so on. But beauty itself, of course, is real. Like, I think, I would say, basically all of us have experienced some form of beauty at some point. It is our own kind of beauty, and we have our, like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And that's part of emptiness for sure. But it is still beauty, and the idea of beauty and the potential for the fabrication of beauty is much older and vaster than we are. Much like with love, they are, to us, they are supra-individual and trans-individual. They transcend us individual human beings. We have constructed perhaps our own versions of beauty, of love, of goodness, and so on. And we fabricate them and project them in our own ways, our particular ways. But we were inspired to do so either by our genetics, or by our society, our culture, our friends, our families, and so on, other people. By in some sense, one way or another, by something external to ourselves, by something vaster, more older, something more ancient than us, something vaster than I, something vaster than thou. So they transcend us, and in this sense, it is also completely appropriate to see them as even as kinds of deities. And there can be so much meaning to be found in projecting things like beauty and love and cultivating them, serving them, as I often say, in text and in lectures, writing and speech and so on, serving these ideas, these great, beautiful children of the good. We serve them by seeing them in the world. So in that sense, and we serve them because it's blissful, it's useful and blissful. It creates cooperation and harmony. Love, for example, it creates cooperation and harmony. If we see any use whatsoever in beings being happy, if we believe in other mind streams, which is a kind of leap of faith, believing in other mind streams, in other beings, but solipsism again, I will talk about that later in some other video. But solipsism also, it's pretty terrible, like for most at least. So the idea that only I exist, there's nothing else beyond me. Solipsism is pretty terrible too, and so though there is a leap of faith, in believing in other beings, it's useful and beautiful to do so, and there's no reason to not believe in that also. It's unknowable, but it's lovely. So if one makes the leap of faith and believes in other beings, other mind streams, they are not maybe beings as such, they don't have to be reified as such, but other mind streams, other flows of appearance and becoming. If one believes in them and sees any value in having them be non-suffering, not manifest suffering, manifest happiness and beauty and so on, one very quickly, if one thinks about it at all, one will be a believer in love, a servant of love, or like one would want to be a servant of love. Love harmonizes, love unites, love rejoices in itself and in others, love just rejoices in everything, love rejoices in the world, love rejoices in love, love loving itself. So even though there's no fact of the matter, whether something is, for example, we could say lovely or not, or beautiful or not, which again does not mean that it's not beautiful or not lovely by any means. It means there's no fact of the matter. Truth and untruth, again, unapplicable. Still, compared to the projection of meaninglessness and lack of beauty and so on, the projection of meaning and beauty tends to be much more blissful and much more harmonious, and tends to, promote harmony. Promote harmony, cooperation, and so on. Very useful, very blissful, very lovely. Love is lovely, beauty is lovely. And there's nothing to be afraid in the practice of emptiness, which the only thing, true emptiness leads to, like real insight into emptiness leads to, is flexibility. So you become more and more free. And when you are more and more free and you get, you're not tangled by such questions, what is the true way, the real way of seeing things? How are things really? When you're no longer chained to truth, you are free to apply your mind and your views more and more as you see fit and as you see blissful and wonderful and lovely. And as your compassion also towards yourself and others leads you to do. So, to reiterate, nihilism, or the sense of meaninglessness, there being no values and so on, nothing being valuable and so on, is not the same as emptiness. Nihilism is a particular view. It's still arbitrary. It's still just as untrue as anything else. Emptiness is beyond all of that. It's the lack of truth and untruth for any view whatsoever. It's like a skeleton key that also demolishes itself in some sense. Emptiness too is an empty dharma. It's just a tool, but it's a wonderful tool. And what leads to the perception of, or the realization of emptiness, what characteristic of reality leads to it the best is mind dependence in one way or another. This could be said. There are other things as well, like impermanence can lead to some perceptions of emptiness and so on. But some sort of mind dependence, for example, with no self, one sees that the emptiness of self. One sees that the sense of self does not have to be there. Sometimes there is one, and sometimes, for example, the body feels like part of me or mine, and so on. And sometimes the mind feels like part of me or mine. But not always. It can be demolished, and thereby it's not intrinsically linked to these phenomena. It's arbitrary. It's a view. It's a projection. It's a fabrication. And that promotes the kind of flexibility. That's the emptiness. And again, mind dependence leads to it. It's mind dependent, whether the mind sees it or not. Its existence depends on the mind. And what it leads to, what emptiness leads to, the utility of it, is flexibility, openness, flexibility, a kind of non-committal relationship in the kind of factual sense to views, like an eternal, infinite openness, just open. Whatever is useful and skillful and beautiful, one utilizes that. Whatever is also coherent and aesthetic, of course, one is completely free to pursue coherence in one's belief systems. Because that's aesthetic and it's very good at persuading others. But other than that, it's secondary. Beauty and flexibility are primary. And beauty, if one wants to serve the ideas of beauty, which the flexibility will allow one to do more and more. I hope this is an adequate answer to this topic. And again, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there was something new or something interesting about it. I liked giving this small talk, and hopefully I will have the opportunity to do so with other topics many times more in the near future. Thank you, friend, and may you be well.